Hi guys, and welcome on Cheaters and Jerks. This channel is about real-life cheating stories and consequences.
I never thought I'd find myself elbowing through a pack of sweaty strangers in some seedy swingers club, dragging my very Christian mother-in-law behind me like she was about to witness the apocalypse. But there I was, hunting down my wife, Eleanor, who was probably getting her kicks in the middle of some messed-up orgy. And then I saw her, grinning like a goddamn lunatic, surrounded by a bunch of freaks in diapers, getting her rocks off in ways I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around. Would you believe that she actually got custody of our children at first? But I didn't give up, and I took it away from her later on. To hear the whole story from the beginning, stick around. I never thought I'd find myself in this position. Me, Alexander Kensington, sitting in a dimly lit cafe, hiring a private investigator to spy on my wife. The absurdity of it all wasn't lost on me, but here I was, watching Max jot down notes as I spilled my guts about Eleanor's strange behavior. "So, you want me to tail her?" Max asked, his piercing blue eyes studying me intently. I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Yes, I need to know where she goes, who she meets, everything." Max leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his notepad. "All right, Mr. Kensington, I'll start tonight. But remember, once you open this door, there's no closing it." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Was I ready for this? Ready to potentially shatter the life I'd built? But then I remembered Eleanor's distant gaze, her secretive smiles at her phone, and I knew I had no choice. "I understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Just, be discreet." Max nodded, a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "Always am." As I left the cafe, the weight of what I'd just set in motion settled on my shoulders. I walked back to my car, my mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. What if Eleanor was cheating? What if she had a whole other life I knew nothing about? I drove home in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets of our upscale neighborhood. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Eleanor's car already there. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and went inside. "Alex, is that you?" Eleanor's voice called from the kitchen. "Yeah, it's me," I replied, hanging up my coat. I found her at the kitchen island, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up as I entered, flashing me that smile that used to make my heart skip a beat. Now, it just made me wonder what secrets lurked behind it. "You're home early," she said, leaning in for a kiss. I obliged, but it felt hollow, mechanical. "Yeah, wrapped up a meeting sooner than expected," I lied smoothly. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, suspecting her of deceit, while feeding her lies of my own. Eleanor chatted about her day as she cooked, mentioning patients and co-workers. I half listened, nodding at appropriate intervals, all the while wondering if any of it was true. Was she really at the hospital all day, or was she somewhere else, with someone else? Dinner was a quiet affair. Isabella and Charles filled the silence with chatter about school and friends, oblivious to the tension between their parents. I watched Eleanor across the table, searching for any sign, any tell that might confirm my suspicions. But she was, as she always was, attentive, loving, the perfect wife and mother. As I helped clean up after dinner, Eleanor's phone buzzed on the counter. I saw her glance at it, a flicker of something, excitement, anticipation, crossing her face before she quickly schooled her features. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, just work," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "They might need me to cover a shift tonight." I felt my jaw clench. Another lie? "I thought you weren't on call this week?" Eleanor paused for a moment, then shrugged. "Things change. You know how it is in healthcare." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She disappeared upstairs, presumably to change. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. When she came back down, she was dressed in scrubs, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. She kissed the kids goodnight, then turned to me. "Don't wait up, okay? It might be a long one." I forced a smile. "Be safe." As soon as the door closed behind her, I pulled out my phone and texted Max. "She just left, said she's going to work." His reply came almost instantly. "On it." The next few hours were torture. I put the kids to bed, went through the motions of my evening routine, all the while checking my phone obsessively for updates from Max. I paced nervously in my study, glancing at my phone every few seconds. It had been a week since I'd hired Max to follow Eleanor, and the waiting was killing me. When the phone finally rang, I snatched it up. "Max, tell me what you found," I demanded, my heart pounding. "Alexander, I've got news." Max's gruff voice came through. "You might want to sit down for this." I lowered myself into my leather chair, gripping the armrest. "Just tell me, Max." "She's been going to a place called the Velvet Room," Max explained. "It's a swingers club, very exclusive. She's been a regular there for some time." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the air leave my lungs. "A swingers club? Are you certain?" "Positive. I've got photographic evidence of her entering and leaving, and from what I've gathered, she's quite active there." I clenched my jaw, rage building inside me. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on my investigation, at least 6 months, possibly longer." 6 months. Half a year of lies, of betrayal. I struggled to keep my voice steady. "What else can you tell me?" Max continued. "She's planning to go there this Friday night. If you want the truth, you'll need to see it for yourself." I knew he was right. As much as it sickened me, I had to see it with my own eyes. "What do you suggest?" "I can get you in, but you'll need a cover, and maybe a witness, someone Eleanor can't easily dismiss." An idea formed in my mind. "I know just the person. Thank you, Max. I'll be in touch about Friday." I ended the call and sat there, my mind reeling. The Velvet Room. I'd heard whispers of such places, but never imagined Eleanor would be involved in something so sordid. After a few moments to collect myself, I made another call. The phone rang several times before a crisp, aristocratic voice answered. Rothwell Residence. "Lady Beatrice, it's Alexander. I need to speak with you urgently. It's about Eleanor." There was a pause. "Is everything all right, Alexander?" "No, I'm afraid it's not. Can I come see you? This isn't a conversation for the phone." "Of course. Come at once." An hour later, I found myself in Lady Beatrice's grand Victorian home. She sat across from me, her silver hair in its usual tight bun, her sharp blue eyes fixed on me. "Now, Alexander, what's this about Eleanor?" I took a deep breath. "Lady Beatrice, I've noticed some concerning behavior from Eleanor lately. Unexplained absences, secretive phone use. I hired a private investigator." Her eyes narrowed. "A private investigator? Surely that's an overreaction." "I wish it was." I pulled out my phone, showing her some of the text messages I'd discovered. The investigator followed her. She's been going to a place called the Velvet Room. It's a swingers club. Lady Beatrice's face paled. "Eleanor would never. There must be some mistake." I shook my head. "I'm sorry, but there's no mistake. The investigator has photographic evidence. She's been going there regularly for at least 6 months." No, this can't be true," Lady Beatrice muttered, her hands shaking slightly. "I'm planning to go there this Friday to see for myself. I was hoping you might come with me, as a witness." Lady Beatrice's eyes flashed with anger. "If what you say is true, she will answer for it. I raised her better than this." She stood up, her posture rigid. "I will accompany you, Alexander. We'll get to the bottom of this disgraceful behavior." We spent the next hour planning our approach. We would enter as a fake couple, pretending to be guests to avoid suspicion. As I left Lady Beatrice's home, I felt a mix of dread and determination. Friday couldn't come soon enough. The neon lights of the Velvet Room buzzed with an irritating hum. I stood there, adjusting my tie with more force than necessary. My jaw felt stiff, tension buzzing in the back of my neck. I couldn't believe I was doing this, taking Lady Beatrice here of all places. She stood beside me, uncomfortable as ever. The dress she wore clung to her old-fashioned sensibilities more than her body. I glanced over at her. She was clutching a small, sequined clutch, lips pursed tight together as if she might bite through the skin. "This is absurd," she muttered between clenched teeth. Still hadn't looked me in the eye since I'd told her where we were going. Absurd or not, it's the only way, I said quietly. Lady Beatrice was the only leverage I had. Eleanor could squirm and lie to me all she wanted, but her mother, she couldn't weasel out of that. The entrance loomed ahead of us, casting a dull red light that felt far too intimate, too wrong. A couple emerged from the door, laughing, the woman's lipstick smeared across the man's collar. Lady Beatrice cringed. I tightened my grip on her wrist slightly, feeling her tremble. "Just remember," I murmured, "Eleanor needs to see you in there." "For God's sake, Alexander," she hissed, "I don't belong in a place like this." "No one does, but here we are," I muttered back, eyes fixed on the entrance as we approached the bouncer. He was a hulking mass of muscle, tattoos crawling up both sides of his neck. He looked us up and down, his eyes lingering a little too long on Lady Beatrice. "We're here for a bit of fun," she forced out, her tone sounding more like a resentful confession than an invitation. Her hand was still gripping mine like a lifeline, nails slightly digging into my skin. The bouncer's lips twitched. That same smug, knowing look crossed his face. He gave a sharp nod. "Enjoy your fun," he rasped, stepping aside. My mind was elsewhere, on whether Max's intel had been right. Would we catch Eleanor tonight? The stench hit as soon as we passed through the velvet-lined doors. Smoke hung in the air like a thick fog, mixing with the sweet, sickly smell of expensive perfume, sweat, and something else, something rancid. The music, a low pounding beat, vibrated through the floorboards, up my legs, into my chest. Everything felt wrong in a way I hadn't been prepared for, no matter how much I'd convinced myself over the past week that I was ready to see whatever Eleanor had been hiding. I glanced at Lady Beatrice out of the corner of my eye. Her face had gone pale, lips a tight line as she clutched my arm like she was a girl again who'd stumbled into the streets after dark. "Stay close," I muttered, though I wasn't sure if it was meant for her or myself. We pushed deeper into the room, past tangled bodies moving as if gravity didn't apply, each one more depraved than the last. I barely recognized people as people anymore, just instinct-driven flesh. Eleanor, I needed to focus. That was the entire reason I was in this hellhole. Not the grotesque displays happening in every shadowy corner, not the music pounding relentlessly in my ears. Her, Eleanor. Another couple brushed against us, a man lazily groping his partner as if my presence didn't register in his drunken, glazed-over mind. Lady Beatrice jerked away with a soft gasp, clutching a small silver rosary, a relic, a trinket she, no doubt, thought would somehow provide protection in this nightmare. Useless. I scanned the room, narrowing my gaze over the sea of bodies. The red lighting cast a lurid glow over everything, making it hard to tell where one person ended and another began. It felt hotter the further we went in, drenched in the humid fog of sweat, lust, and regret. And then I saw her. At first, my brain didn't register who it was, standing among that sickening mass of people. The steel blue focus I'd trained all these years just stuttered for a second. Then it hit me. Hard. Eleanor, my wife. She was flushed, her face alive with some inner exhilaration, laughing with, Jesus Christ, with a group of men around her. Not just any men. Diapers. Adult fucking diapers. My body went numb at the sight. What the hell was I looking at? My wife, the woman who shared my bed for the last 15 years, was surrounded by these massive, childlike, grotesque figures. And they were taking care of this shit place. One by one, going on. The bile rose in the back of my throat. No, this wasn't happening. This wasn't real. I wasn't standing in this club, watching my wife with these men, laughing, joyful, like she was free, and I was the one who had somehow missed that smirk on her face all those months ago when I started noticing the lies. For a second, my eyes darted to Lady Beatrice. She had turned rigid beside me, hollow horror painted across her face, her eyes locked on her daughter in an unfolding nightmare. Slowly, her hand reached up to the rosary. Her knuckles had gone white, like the little beads were the only thing keeping her from sinking into the floor. But it was the whisper that left her lips that sliced through. Dear God. Her voice barely cut above the music, but it might as well have shattered glass. It was so sharp. I watched something fierce swirl inside her. something brighter than shame. And just as quickly as it had hit me, it hit her too. She surged forward. "Eleanor!" The word came out like a snarl, like the hiss of something venomous ready to strike. Lady Beatrice, poised, reserved, always composed in her upper-class demeanor, tore through the crowd like a lioness who just found a predator in her den. All sense of decorum, gone. The years of pent-up traditionalism, Catholic guilt, whatever had kept her in check. It snapped right then, shredded. I followed as best I could, eyes still fixed on Eleanor, as Lady Beatrice pushed people out of the way, charging toward the scene like a missile locked on a target. Eleanor was in mid-laugh when she heard her name, head tilted back, flashing teeth in a way I hadn't seen in, I couldn't even remember. Her eyes popped open, wide with terror, before she even processed who had spoken. The color drained from her face, and she stumbled, nearly tripping over one of the men in front of her, knocking over a bottle of God knows what. The men, diaper-clad monsters, blinked dumbly at the intrusion, like someone had just spoken another language to them. They didn't stop right away, but Eleanor's terror was immediate. She took a shaky step back, blinking like she was just waking from a dream. Every trace of her joy, gone. "Mother, no. It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like." Lady Beatrice had broken through the ring of bodies by then. She stood in front of her daughter, hot and trembling with rage. "How dare you?" She spat the words like they burned her throat. Eleanor flinched backward, raising her hands weakly. "Mother!" Eleanor's voice cracked, but it was the tremble of guilt, not fear. Not fear of what she was doing, but fear of being seen. "No!" Lady Beatrice roared, voice shaking as her hand lashed out faster than I could react. A crack rang out above the pounding bass, sickly and clean. Eleanor recoiled, clutching her face like it had split open. Her cheek flushed red in an instant, the print of her mother's hand visible in the lurid red glow of the club. I stood there, motionless, watching. It felt like the floor beneath me had just vanished. Everything I had known had disintegrated in front of me. I wanted to say something. I wanted to rip her out of the grasp, but there was nothing to rip her from anymore. I had already lost her. "How dare you disgrace this family like this?" Lady Beatrice's shriek cut through the room, catching the judgmental gaze of even the most depraved souls in the club. Eleanor, tears welling now, shook her head like a lost child. "Please, let me explain." Eleanor's voice was cracking, sobs scrambling at the back of her throat. "Let me explain. It's not—" "You think you can explain this?" Lady Beatrice stood towering over her. Her fury morphed from incredulous rage to something darker, something entirely devoid of the maternal love that may have once lived inside her. I had only seen expressions of this level in finance boardrooms, the calculated, ice-cold shutoff. "I'm done listening to you. You're filth." And just like that, my stomach curled in on itself, letting the last pit drop through me. Before anyone could say another word, a thick-set bouncer materialized out of the dim light, grabbing hold of my arm. "All right, that's enough," he snapped, his voice ice-cold like that of a robot kept in check. His grip bit into my arm, and I twisted on instinct, pulling back. "You need to leave, now." He growled like that was the final word. "Get your damn hands off me," I barked, yanking my arm away. "That's my wife you've got in there." The bouncer's eyes narrowed, deadpan. "Not in here, she isn't." Before I could react, another hand, another bouncer I hadn't even seen coming, grabbed Lady Beatrice, who thrashed in his grasp. "Unhand me, how dare you!" Another bark from the bouncer. "Move, now!" Before I could pull free, their grip tightened around both of us, steering us closer to the door. Eleanor's expression was a mixture of relief and grief. As we stood outside the club, the cold night air hit me like a slap in the face. Lady Beatrice was shaking next to me, her hands trembling from the force of the slap she'd just given Eleanor. I tried to steady her, but my own hands weren't much better. For a long moment, we just stood there in silence, the weight of what we'd seen crushing down on us. "We need to get home," I finally managed to say, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. Lady Beatrice just nodded, her face a mask of fury and shock. The drive back was tense as hell. Lady Beatrice clutched her rosary like a lifeline, mumbling prayers under her breath. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, trying to focus on the road and not on the image of Eleanor surrounded by those men. Anger coursed through me, hot and fierce. But underneath it all, I felt something else growing. A cold, hard determination. My kids weren't going to be dragged into this mess. I'd make damn sure of that. When we pulled up to the house, I expected Lady Beatrice to bolt. Instead, she turned to me with steel in her eyes. "I'm staying," she said firmly. "I need to face her, to tell her exactly what she's done." I nodded, understanding her need for confrontation. "All right," I said. "Let's go in." We walked into the house, the silence oppressive. I half expected Eleanor to already be there, but the place was empty. Lady Beatrice sank onto the couch, her rosary still clutched tightly in her hands. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "My Eleanor. How could she do this?" I didn't have an answer for her. Instead, I went to the kitchen and poured us both a stiff drink. When I came back, Lady Beatrice had tears streaming down her face. "I raised her better than this," she said, her voice cracking. "Where did I go wrong?" I handed her the glass and sat down heavily beside her. "You didn't go wrong," I said. "Eleanor made her own choices." Lady Beatrice took a sip of her drink, wincing at the burn. "But why? Why would she throw everything away like this?" I shook my head, the anger rising again. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." We sat in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes, and still, Eleanor didn't come home. Finally, Lady Beatrice spoke again. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, my mind racing. "I'm going to protect my children," I said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure Eleanor can't hurt them anymore." Lady Beatrice nodded, a look of grim determination on her face. "Good," she said. "I'll help you in any way I can." Just then, we heard the sound of a key in the lock. Lady Beatrice stiffened beside me, and I felt my own body tense up. The door opened slowly, and there she was. I stood there, watching Eleanor crumble before us. Her mascara-streaked face and disheveled appearance were a far cry from the woman I'd married. The sight of her like this should have moved me, but I felt nothing but cold detachment. "Eleanor," I said, my voice steady and firm, "you need to leave, now." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Alexander, please, you can't mean that. We have a family, a life together." I shook my head. "Had, Eleanor. We had a family. You threw that away the moment you decided to indulge in whatever the hell that was at the club." Lady Beatrice, who had been silently seething beside me, spoke up. "You disgust me, Eleanor. I raised you better than this. How could you do this to your children? To your husband?" Eleanor's sobs intensified. "Mother, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I felt so trapped, so suffocated by everything." "Suffocated?" I scoffed. "By what? A loving family, financial security, a life most people would kill for?" She tried to reach for my hand again, but I stepped back. "Alex, please, I love you. I love our children. We can work through this." I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. "Work through this? There's no working through this, Eleanor. You've been living a double life for months. You've lied, cheated, and humiliated me and our family. And for what? Some perverted thrill?" Lady Beatrice nodded in agreement. "You've brought shame upon us all, Eleanor. I can't even look at you right now." Eleanor's face contorted in anguish. "Mother, please don't say that. I'm still your daughter." "No," Lady Beatrice said coldly. "My daughter would never have done something so vile. You're no longer welcome in this family." I watched as Eleanor's world crumbled around her. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But that part was overshadowed by the betrayal and disgust I felt. "I have already called my lawyer," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "The divorce papers will be ready tomorrow. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight." Eleanor's eyes widened in panic. But what about the children? You can't keep me from them." I felt my jaw clench. "Watch me. I'll be damned if I let them anywhere near you after what you've done." She stood up, swaying slightly. "You can't do this, Alexander. I'm their mother. A mother who prioritized her twisted desires over her family's well-being, I retorted. I think the judge will see things my way. Lady Beatrice stepped between us. Eleanor, you need to leave, now, before you cause any more damage to this family. Eleanor looked from me to her mother, desperation etched on her face. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. That's not my problem anymore. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy everything we built together. She made one last attempt, reaching out to touch my arm. Alex, please. I love you. We can get through this. I'll do anything. Go to therapy, whatever it takes. I jerked away from her touch. It's too late for that, Eleanor. You made your choice. Now live with it. With that, I turned and walked towards the stairs, leaving Eleanor sobbing in the living room with her mother. As I climbed the steps, I heard Lady Beatrice's stern voice. You have an hour to pack your things and leave, Eleanor. After that, I'm calling the police. I entered our bedroom, my bedroom now, and closed the door behind me. Leaning against it, I finally let out a shaky breath. The weight of everything that had happened in the past 24 hours came crashing down on me. But I couldn't afford to break down. Not now. I had to be strong for my children. As I heard Eleanor's muffled sobs and the sound of her hurriedly packing downstairs, I began to plan our future, a future without her. I called Eleanor the next day, telling her to come home for another serious talk. My stomach churned with disgust as I waited for her arrival. When she finally walked through the door, I couldn't even look at her. Sit down, I said coldly, gesturing to the chair across from me. Eleanor hesitated, her eyes darting around nervously before she complied. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. You're fucking disgusting, I spat out, my voice dripping with contempt. Eleanor flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. Alex, please, don't Alex me, I cut her off sharply. You're nothing but a filthy trash, prancing around in that club surrounded by men in fucking diapers. What kind of sick pervert are you? She started sobbing, but I felt no sympathy. My anger and revulsion were too strong. I can't even look at you without wanting to vomit, I continued, my words like venom. You're pathetic, a disgrace to this family and to yourself. Just then, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. I stood up and went to answer it, returning moments later with a thick envelope. These are for you, I said, tossing the divorce papers onto the table in front of Eleanor. Her hands shook as she picked up the documents, her eyes widening as she realized what they were. I watched with grim satisfaction as the color drained from her face. You're really doing this? She whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded curtly. It's over, Eleanor. I want you out of my life and away from our children. You've lost the right to call yourself their mother. Eleanor stared at the papers, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I could see the panic setting in as reality hit her. Good. Let her suffer. My lawyer will be in touch, I said coldly, turning to leave the room. Don't bother trying to fight this. You won't win. As I walked away, I heard Eleanor frantically dialing her phone. I paused in the hallway, listening to her conversation. Edmund? It's Eleanor, she said, her voice shaking. He served me with divorce papers. What do I do? I couldn't hear the response, but Eleanor's next words made my blood boil. Do whatever it takes, she muttered. I'm not losing everything. I clenched my fists, fury coursing through me. So she wanted to fight? Fine. I'd destroy her in court if that's what it took. She wouldn't get a penny more than she deserved, which in my opinion was absolutely nothing. 3 months later, I stood in the courtroom, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and anxiety. The air was thick with tension as I faced Eleanor across the room. Her lawyer, Edmund, a smug bastard if I ever saw one, was already gearing up for his performance. Your Honor, Edmund began, his voice dripping with false sincerity. We're here today because my client, Mrs. Eleanor Kensington, has been subjected to years of emotional abuse and neglect at the hands of her husband. I clenched my fists, resisting the urge to jump up and call him out on his bullshit. Judith, my lawyer, placed a calming hand on my arm. Mr. Kensington, Edmund continued, gesturing towards me dramatically. has consistently prioritized his work over his family, leaving my client feeling isolated and unloved. Is it any wonder she sought comfort elsewhere? I watched as Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the wounded wife perfectly. It made me sick. Furthermore, Edmund pressed on, Mr. Kensington's controlling behavior extended to monitoring Mrs. Kensington's whereabouts and hiring a private investigator to stalk her. This level of paranoia and mistrust is indicative of an abusive relationship. The judge, an older woman with a stern face, listened intently, her expression giving nothing away. When it was our turn, Judith stood up, her posture confident and commanding. Your Honor, while Mr. Edmund paints a sympathetic picture of Mrs. Kensington, the facts tell a very different story. She walked over to the evidence table and picked up a stack of photos. These images, taken at an establishment called the Velvet Room, show Mrs. Kensington engaging in behavior that can only be described as reckless and potentially harmful to her children. The judge's eyebrows raised slightly as she examined the photos. Eleanor squirmed in her seat, her facade of victimhood slipping for a moment. We also have testimony from Lady Beatrice Rothwell, Mrs. Kensington's own mother, detailing her daughter's erratic behavior and neglect of her familial duties. Lady Beatrice stood up, her voice clear and strong, as she recounted finding Eleanor at the club, surrounded by men in diapers. I could see the disgust on the judge's face, mirroring my own feelings. Your Honor, Judith concluded, this is not just about infidelity. Mrs. Kensington has demonstrated a pattern of behavior that is dangerous and destructive, especially with young children involved. We ask that you consider the safety and well-being of Isabella and Charles when making your decision. The judge nodded, her expression thoughtful. I've heard enough for now. We'll take a brief recess, and I'll return with my initial ruling. As we waited, I felt a glimmer of hope. Surely, after all the evidence we'd presented, the judge would see that Eleanor was unfit to be a primary caregiver. But when we reconvened, my world shattered. While Mrs. Kensington's actions are certainly questionable from a moral standpoint, the judge began, I do not find sufficient evidence that she is an unfit mother. Therefore, I am awarding primary custody of Isabella and Charles to Mrs. Kensington, with Mr. Kensington granted visitation rights. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could this be happening? How could they not see what kind of person Eleanor really was? I glanced over at Eleanor, catching a fleeting smile of triumph on her face, before she quickly masked it with a look of relief, tinged with sorrow. The bitch was still playing her role, and somehow she was winning. Lady Beatrice leaned forward from her seat behind me, her voice low, but filled with determination. This isn't over, Alexander. We will fight. This Antichrist will not rise and destroy my grandchildren. I nodded, my jaw clenched tight. She was right. This wasn't over. I couldn't give up now, not when Isabella and Charles's future was at stake. I'd find a way to protect them, no matter what it took. I stood in my study, staring out the window as the rain pelted against the glass. The judge's decision still echoed in my ears, mocking me. How could they give Eleanor primary custody? The thought of my children living with her, exposed to her reckless behavior, made my blood boil. I couldn't let this stand. I wouldn't. Picking up my phone, I dialed a familiar number. Max, it's Alexander. I need your help again. What can I do for you, Mr. Kensington? Max's voice was professional, detached. Just what I needed right now. I need you to dig deeper into Eleanor's activities. The court ruling was bullshit, and I'm not about to let my kids suffer because of it. Follow her. Document everything. I want to know every move she makes, every person she meets. Can you do that? There was a pause on the other end. Of course, Mr. Kensington. I'll get right on it. Good. And Max, don't hold back. If there's dirt to be found, I want it all. I hung up and poured myself a scotch. The amber liquid burned as it went down, but I welcomed the sensation. It was a reminder that I could still feel something other than rage and despair. Days passed in a blur of work and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my job, trying to distract myself from the gnawing worry about what Eleanor might be exposing our children to. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, hoping it was Max with some news. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Max called. Mr. Kensington, I think you'll want to see this in person. An hour later, I was sitting across from Max in a nondescript cafe. He slid a manila envelope across the table. What you're about to see? It's not pretty, Mr. Kensington. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. As I flipped through the photos and documents, my stomach churned. Eleanor at the Velvet Room, as expected. But then... Jesus Christ, I muttered. Max had captured images of Eleanor entering sketchy warehouses, exchanging packages with shady-looking characters. There were photos of her at underground parties, surrounded by people clearly high on drugs. In one particularly damning shot, she was snorting something off a grimy table. How recent are these? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. All within the past week, Mr. Kensington, and there's more. Max pulled out a small recorder. I managed to get some audio. Well, you should listen for yourself. He pressed play, and Eleanor's voice filled the air. She was laughing, talking about how she couldn't wait for her next hit. There was mention of deals, of owing people money. It was a side of her I never could have imagined. I sat back, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My children. They're living with her while she's doing all this. Max nodded grimly. I'm afraid so, Mr. Kensington. I clenched my fists, anger and determination surging through me. This ends now. I'm not letting her destroy our kids' lives. As I gathered the evidence, my mind was already racing with the next steps. I'd called Judith, my lawyer, immediately. We'd get an emergency hearing, present this evidence to the judge. There was no way they could ignore this. Eleanor had made her choices. Now she'd face the consequences. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding with anticipation. Today was the day, the custody rehearing that could change everything. The cool autumn breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of change. As I climbed the steps, I caught sight of my lawyer, Judith, waiting for me at the entrance. Her confident smile was reassuring. Alexander, she greeted me, extending her hand. Are you ready? I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. As ready as I'll ever be. We made our way through security and into the courthouse. The hallways were a flurry of activity, but I barely noticed. My mind was focused on one thing, getting my children back. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Eleanor sitting with her lawyer, Edmund. She looked composed, but I could see the tension in her posture. Lady Beatrice, my former mother-in-law, sat on our side of the room, her face a mask of determination. The bailiff called the court to order, and the judge entered. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope as I noticed how attentive she seemed compared to the last hearing. Judith began presenting our case, methodically laying out the new evidence we had gathered. Your Honor, we have uncovered significant information that casts serious doubt on Ms. Kensington's ability to provide a stable and safe environment for the children. She proceeded to present the evidence, bank statements showing hidden accounts, photos of Eleanor engaging in drug use, and recordings of her erratic behavior. With each piece of evidence, I watched Eleanor's calm facade begin to crumble. Edmund, Eleanor's lawyer, tried to object. Your Honor, this is nothing more than a smear campaign against my client. These allegations are baseless and... The judge cut him off. I'll be the judge of that, Mr. Ramsey. Please continue, Ms. Blackwood. As Judith continued presenting our case, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and sadness. This was the mother of my children, the woman I had once loved. How had it come to this? When it was Eleanor's turn to testify, she tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks forming. Ms. Kensington, Judith began, can you explain these bank statements showing large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts? Eleanor stuttered. Those are personal investments. They have nothing to do with my ability to care for my children. Judith pressed on. And what about these photos showing you using illegal substances? Eleanor's face paled. That was a one-time thing. I was under a lot of stress. As the cross-examination continued, Eleanor's responses became increasingly erratic and defensive. It was clear that the evidence was overwhelming. Then came Lady Beatrice's testimony. She took the stand, her posture rigid, and her voice filled with a mix of sorrow and determination. Your Honor, she began, it pains me deeply to speak against my own daughter, but I cannot, in good conscience, remain silent. She went on to describe Eleanor's recent behavior in detail, the late nights, the questionable company she kept, the neglect of her children. "This is not a fit mother," Lady Beatrice stated firmly, her voice cracking slightly. "She has lost her way completely, and I fear for the safety and well-being of my grandchildren." The courtroom fell silent as Lady Beatrice finished her testimony. I could see Eleanor glaring at her mother, a mix of betrayal and anger in her eyes. As the final arguments were made, I felt the tension in the room rise. Eleanor sat across from me, her face pale and anxious, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I felt my own heart pounding, every second stretching out into eternity as we waited for the judge's decision. Finally, the judge cleared her throat and began. "Based on the new evidence presented, I have reevaluated the custody arrangements. The court has serious concerns regarding Ms. Kensington's recent behavior and associations." I held my breath, hardly daring to hope. "Therefore, I am granting full custody of the children to Mr. Kensington." A wave of relief washed over me, so intense I almost felt dizzy. But the judge wasn't finished. She turned her stern gaze to Eleanor. "Ms. Kensington, you will have supervised visitation until you can demonstrate stability and a commitment to your children's well-being." For a moment, there was silence. Then Eleanor erupted. "This isn't fair," she screamed, jumping to her feet. "You're all against me." The judge banged her gavel. "Order! Ms. Kensington, control yourself, or you will be held in contempt." As the reality of the situation sank in, Eleanor collapsed back into her chair, sobbing. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a burning anger at what Eleanor had put our family through. As we left the courtroom, Lady Beatrice approached me, tears in her eyes. "Alexander," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for everything, but I'm glad the children will be with you now." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Thank you," I finally managed. "For everything." Outside the courthouse, I saw my children waiting with their nanny. Isabella and Charles ran to me, and I scooped them up in my arms, holding them tight. "Are we going home with you, Dad?" Isabella asked, her voice small and hopeful. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Yes, sweetheart, we're all going home together." As we walked away from the courthouse, I felt the weight of what lay ahead. The road wouldn't be easy, but we were together. And for now, that was enough. 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 Hey everyone, if you found this story gripping and want to hear more crazy ones like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping tales every week. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. If you have your own wild stories to share or ideas you'd like us to bring to life, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching.